Good morning. Welcome to episode 69 of the 476ers podcast. On this episode, we're going to talk about last night's Miami game. So stay tuned.
Yeah. Justice for the blind, just something that'll find in the rhymes that are coming from my
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to episode 69, which is a hilarious number, but it's whatever. I mean, it's perfect because last night's experience was sexual. You know what I mean? No, I'm joking. There's just gonna be a lot of off-color jokes like that. First and foremost, I want to apologize because I left you guys without a good podcast to step to, which is a shout out to an old hip hop song for those who don't know or do know, whatever. I've been very sick over the last few days. This weekend was rough. Who knows? I just feel like I'm just in a perpetually sick. That's all that's happening to me. Just going from almost healthy to sick. Sometimes I think that recording the podcast is aiding in my sickness because it just makes me exhausted after I'm done. But I'm going to do it. I'm going to keep doing it because I'm here for you. I'm a man of the people, as I keep saying. So last night, played Miami. I'm going to do an NBA podcast eventually. I mean, I also, though, because there wasn't a lot to talk about. What were we going to talk? What were we going to take away from the Nuggets game? Nothing to take away from that. Maxey played really well. If somebody has to score, someone's going to shoot all the shots. There's no one else. So, yeah, Maxey played good. He scored a lot of points that game in a variety of ways. But, there's just not a lot. That game, he played well, but that game is a lot like not to compare him to MCW, but the point is that, MCW at one point looked like, he was averaging a triple-double for the first 2 or 3 games of his rookie year. And then we found out he actually sucked, because someone has to score points. So, it's just not a lot to take from that. He scored a lot of points and he looked good doing it. Shot a lot of shots. And then, the next game, what are we going to take away from Atlanta? You know what I mean? It looks like we tried to pull a fast one on the NBA. I'll be honest with you. It looks like we tried to pull a fast one on the NBA. We, which fuck them, honestly. This kind of irritates me a little bit. I get it, but I don't. As we're getting slammed by COVID and people are having, which doesn't make sense anyway. I don't even understand this rule. So based on contact tracing, Kevin Durant sat out for 7 days. Based on contact tracing. He didn't have COVID. He registered a negative test every day, twice a day, I think. Doesn't have COVID, has to sit out for a week. Based on contact tracing because he was around somebody who had COVID. Well, our entire team was around Seth, right? You would suspect. So based on contact tracing, wasn't everyone supposed to quarantine for a week? I don't get it. I don't understand how you make the rule. I don't quite understand how you decide this rule. I just don't understand anyway. So, half of our team is out. I think we tried to pull a fast one by saying we don't have enough players. Look, Ben and Joe are injured. And the NBA said, well, then you're going to forfeit. Because we tried to last minute say Ben and Joe were going to be out with an injury. You know what I mean? And the NBA saw through that smoke screen. Listen, Daryl Morey does shit like this all the time. So, yeah, I believe that's what happened. And then Ben sat out a second game to make it look more legitimate. So, whatever. Whatever. Not a lot to say. The Hawks game is kind of rough. Joe comes back. Where, you're out there with a bunch of rookies. I think Joe looked almost shell-shocked a little bit. I don't know what to say about that. Joe looked confused, and they tried to run us off the court. They did what they were supposed to do. You know what I mean? Full court pressing, forcing Danny. Danny doesn't make a shot against Atlanta. And then last night's game happened. Now, I mean, last night's game is the type of game that, obviously the Heat are slammed too by COVID, but they got this crazy flame throwing backcourt of fucking Tyler and Duncan Robinson, and apparently Gabe Vincent, who I know nothing about, who decides to flamethrow against us also. And, they're painting their team with pride. Again, I think it's a fluke that they went to the finals last year, but they're a prideful team, and Tyler Hero played big in the finals. You think he's not going to play big in a regular season game like this? So it's an easy game to lose. I assure you, it's an easy game to lose. Do I think we should have lost that game? No, I don't think we should have lost to the Heat. I don't think we should lose to the Heat if they're healthy and we're healthy, honestly. But it's a very, very much in our wheelhouse to lose that game. And I thought through the first half, bad. We're going to talk about Joe right now. Through the first half, Joe looked he looked just out of it. He looked like a guy who had played a back to back, is what he looked like, and just didn't look like he had it. But I should have never lost my faith, because I have been talking about how Joe all season has been doing this thing where he is trying to get his team involved, trying to do whatever before he asserts himself. And in the first half, that's actually probably what he did. The second half, he decides, no, we're not losing this fucking game. Let me just read this off. I mean, again, so to me, and I put this on Facebook yesterday, that this to me is Joe's best game as a Sixer. I rewatched the second half just now, and I mean, it's stunning. You know what I mean? This is again, superstar material. This is MVP without a question. If the fans were at the arena yesterday, it would have been MVP chants. You would have heard that MVP chants up and down Broad Street. You know what I mean? And he would deserve every second of it. In the third quarter, so we start the third quarter with Ben. I didn't write the first few minutes before Ben sits, but pretty much so before Ben sits at one point, which I don't no, okay, I'm sorry. Before Ben sits, he gets 2 assists to Joe back to back, and then he sits. He has one assist to Joe on I can't remember what that bucket is. They come down and score a 3-pointer. Then Ben throws the alley-oop. Starting from that alley-oop, that's 2 points right there. Ben ends up finishing the third quarter with 20 points and 3 assists. From that alley-oop on, and so he sits with 3 minutes left in the third. He scores 18 points. He finishes with 18 points and 3 assists throughout that stretch. He's responsible for 27 points in that essentially 5-minute stretch of basketball. About 5. No, longer. That 6-minute stretch of basketball. He scores 18 points and he dishes out 3 assists. 1 3-pointer to Isaiah Joe, which is off a dribble handoff. 1 to Danny Green in the corner where he gets double teamed. Another 1 to Isaiah Joe where all 3 Heat defenders are converging on him at the top of the key, and he dishes it to Isaiah Joe, who hits a 3-pointer. And it's just MVP. So in that stretch, he finishes 15 total possessions. We finished with a 1.8 point per possession average, which if you remember my podcast last week, I mean, 1.8 that's unheard of. That's like a record-setting thing, right? That's only a stretch of basketball. 15 possessions isn't enough, but just a point that to the point where we are playing basketball through Joel Embiid in that third quarter with rookies on the floor. And Danny Green, and I'll talk about Danny in a second. 1.8 point per possession. Joe sits, Ben comes in, and between the time that Ben comes in and Joe comes back in the fourth quarter, we go 7 points on 17 possessions. So compare this. In 15 possessions with just Joe, it's 27 points. Joe leaves, Ben comes, 17 points on 17 possessions. And what's interesting about this is that it's kind of it's good. It's not as bad as it looks, but it's also not as good as it sounds, right? 1 point per possession isn't bad, but you expect that if you have a lot of bench guys in, that's probably what you're expecting to do. What's interesting about this is that the first half of this, the first 7-8 possessions, we don't score. So if I would have broke this down by that, it'd be 8 possessions with no points. And then the last half of this is when we score all of the points. Or no, I think the first 8 possessions we score 2, and then the last 8 possessions we score 15 points. And I'll talk about Ben in a second. At that point, Ben comes out of the game. He comes out. He gets a foul. Joe comes back in. And then over the next 5 possessions, we score 2 points with Ben. Between Ben and Joe playing together, we score 2 points in 5 possessions. Ben fouls out, and then over the next 22 possessions, we score 25 points with Ben on the bench, eventually with Maxey on the bench too. With 25 points and 22 possessions, it's about 1.1 points per possession. That's not great. That's a little bit below average. But the point being, I don't mean to make this sound like I'm lobbying to that, Ben is trash or anything like that, even though I'm going to say he is in a second. But um, it's just to show, you know, no matter what coach you put in this fucking game right now, unless Joe's in the game, we're not winning. You know what I mean? It's just the only way to say it. It's the only way to say it. Unless Joe is in the game, we're not winning. And what's unfortunate, before we go, it's unfortunate. Unless Joe's in the game, we're not winning. Joe is. I mean, this was special. This again. This is his best performance. Even when he scored, I think his career high was against the Lakers his rookie year, or his first year playing. I think his career high was against the Lakers. He scored 44, and I think that was it. I don't know. Anyway, we beat that team handedly. That Lakers team. It was just whatever. It wasn't a good game particularly. We beat them pretty easily. And Joe is just kind of fucking around with all of them, doing whatever. This is a game where he scored 45 points in a way where we needed every single basket, where we're coming from behind, and it's just clutch shot after clutch shot, or clutch decision after clutch decision. He has some turnovers late. He has a couple turnovers late in the fourth quarter, which are unfortunate. But I mean, he ices the game with 2 free throws. I mean, he just 13 for 13 from the free throw line. What big man does that? There's just no centers that do that unless it's like Dirk. You know what I mean? Who's not really a center, but Dirk will do that. But that's Dirk. Dirk is like one of the best shooting big men ever. That's Dirk. Joker could do that probably. You know what I mean? But it's just crazy to think that. It's just crazy. I don't even know what to say. I mean, just MVP. Just MVP. He finally, Bleacher Report posted something yesterday about Joe taking over the game in overtime, which he does, but Bleacher Report is just not good at this, and it's just like, hey, he dominated the second half completely. He scored 35 points in the second half. And you're just completely missing the point, but it's Bleacher Report. I don't expect anything great out of them unless it's, Game of Zones. And it's just crazy. He scores 20 points in that third quarter before he sits, and then essentially over the last 12 minutes of game action, he scores 15 points. The impressive thing is how in shape he is right now. I mean, it's really, really impressive. I don't know what the fuck he did between the end of the bubble and the beginning of this season. My man must have only been running and eating, because somehow he didn't really lose weight. I mean, he looks still about the same size, I think. Looks a little more defined. But he just, in the post-game conference, he said he could play another one, which, it's probably not true. But it's not true. But the point is he also didn't sound gassed when he was talking. You know what I mean? That was impressive. I mean, he just looked in the fourth quarter and in overtime, and not only that, but bringing the ball up. That is an extra exhausting thing. You know what I mean? He's bringing the ball up too. So not only is he, because again, we talked about centers beating centers down to establish an early position, right? And he's not even doing that. He's just bringing the ball up and ripping through their defense. I mean, it's impressive. And you can say whatever you want. If Bam would have been there, would have been a little bit tougher. I still think he would have trashed Bam. Bam isn't the one-on-one defender I think that people think he is. He is a really good one. I mean, let me take that back. Bam is a very good one-on-one defender, but that is limited to centers who don't have a whole lot of post ability, or centers who are smaller than him generally, or his size. Bam is not stopping Joe. Bam is just not strong enough, if I'm being honest. He just isn't strong enough. I just watched him get bodied too much in the finals. You know what I mean? He just isn't strong enough. If there's anything Bam needs to do is to get stronger, and he doesn't look like he has. He's not stopping Joe from doing whatever he wants. I assure you of that. He doesn't stop Joe from doing anything of that he wants. There's a chance Joe fouls Bam out of the game. A high chance, a high probability that he fouls Bam out of the game. I'm surprised they didn't try to put Kelly Olynyk on Joe more, because Kelly is, strong center of gravity. He's also dirty as shit and exhausting to play against. So I'm surprised they didn't try that. Maybe Eric didn't want to injure Joe, so he decided not to do that. But yeah, I mean, just dominant. I don't know what else to say. 4 turnovers, obviously. Joe's turnovers, he has the most turnovers, but one of them was that Maxey play. He's expecting Maxey to stay at the top of the key instead of cutting through, which is just a miscommunication. That's just guys haven't not played together that much, because Maxey, if it's Seth is standing there getting ready to shoot. Maxey is a better finisher. He's thinking, I'm gonna cut and beat my man to the rim. And Joe probably could have, depending on the personnel, it's the right decision. It's the right pass. So it goes out of bounds. Just plays big. Just plays big. I don't know what else to say. I mean, just completely, we're down 10, and he essentially brings us back single-handedly. You know what I mean? Not essentially. He does bring us back. It's not only that, it's the defense, too. Yesterday, he's just a menace on defense. 5 steals, mostly because of him stealing alley-oops. 1 steal is great in the third quarter where he catches, just catches. I don't know if he sees out the corner of the eye. He sees Tyler Hero cutting back door and intercepts the pass that comes to him. Just steals it. Just big. Had 1 block. Probably should have had more blocks. The one they call a foul on. The 1 block he does have probably could have been called a foul, but the one before that where Precious tried to dunk and Joe fouled it gets called by the official behind Joe. He calls that foul because it looks like Joe comes down on him, but the official on the strong side of the play probably sees that Joe, it's a legitimate block. You know what I mean? Because Precious goes up and tries to double pump, and Joe hits the ball, and so the back official should have never called that. It's a bad call by him. So whatever, bad call, doesn't matter. The officials call some really crazy shit, but honestly, every one of those 4-point plays were fouls. Every one of the 4-point plays or 3-point fouls, they were all fouls. I assure you. The Dakota Mathias, all of those. The Isaiah Joe foul on the 3-pointer, it was a foul. He hit his arm. It's clear. He hits his left arm. I don't know what Allah's talking about. He hits his left arm. The broadcast is almost becoming unlistenable. I'll be honest with you. I love Zoo with all my heart. He's been here forever. But they're really, really becoming unlistenable. You know what I mean? I get it. You're homers. But Jesus Christ. You know what I mean? Every time I send the homie TJ something, I always send a gif of like Allah saying, oh, I don't know about that one, partner. And then it's always like somebody bloodied and beaten as they're, they've been fouled to death. And Allah over here just isn't sure if that's a foul. And listen, Joe benefits from a lot of somewhat ticky-tack fouls. They are legitimate fouls. I didn't feel like there were any fouls that happened yesterday that were not fouls. You know what I mean? But, some of those are ticky-tack. Doesn't matter. Joe is unbelievable. He's the MVP. I don't give a shit what anyone says. This is the best. Right now, he's playing like the best basketball player in the NBA. NBA.com ranked all the MVP guys. I think they had LeBron first, and they had Steph up there. Definitely Steph deserves to be up there. And Joe was ranked 5th, and he should be ranked higher than that. But I think after shit like Bleacher Report and more as the narrative grows, more people will do it, especially on the game yesterday where Ben finishes with 5, 6, and 12 and fouls out of the game with 6 turnovers. Listen, and this is where it comes down to being unlistenable. Listen, Hala and Mark, you're not going to tell me that Ben had a good offensive game. You're not. You're not going to tell me he had a good offensive game. You're not going to tell me that. I don't give a shit what you think right now. Okay, he made some good passes, sure. Yeah, I don't know if he made any good passes other than his just drive and kick. Just some basic drive and kick passes, which is all he has in the arsenal. It's the only thing he has available to him is to drive and the kick. You know what I mean? But when a team can game plan you out of a game that easily, that's problematic. He finishes, he shoots 2 shots yesterday and goes 1 for 2 from the free throw line. He shoots twice. One of them is an offensive rebound, which is a good job because that's him getting involved in the offense. That happens in the fourth quarter. And the first basket, I think, happens in the first half at some point. I don't even remember. But you're not going to – you finish with 12 assists and 6 turnovers, and you're not going to tell me – you're not going to sit here and tell me that's a good offensive game. You're not going to tell me that's a good offensive game. You're just not. You're just not like he has a ton of offensive rebounds. He finishes with 1 offensive rebound. That's the putback. He doesn't do a whole lot. Ben right now is 6'8" Rajon Rondo. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with being 6'8" Rondo. But Rondo wasn't the first overall pick ever in his life. Rondo was a guy who people did not expect to be anything special. You know, and then playoff Rondo comes along, which we haven't seen playoff Ben yet. Playoff Ben be feeling dangerous. Dangerous to our team. We haven't seen that yet. And Rondo shot. Rondo was willing to shoot. Now, again, as I pointed out before, a guy willingness to shoot doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to keep the defense honest. But the point being, right now, Ben is Rondo without any accolades of playoff Rondo. You know what I mean? There's just nothing. He's just Rondo. And on defense, the problem. What's scary is this. There was a Ryan Russillo's podcast. I think it was last week. He talked to some scouts comparing Ben to Jalen. Of course he did, because he's a fucking hater. He's going to compare Jalen to Ben. You know, the guy who's a complete basketball player to Ben, whatever. But why not talk to scouts and compare Ben to Zion, two like complicated basketball figures? Like, what are these guys exactly? Anyway, compares a regular basketball player who's complete to Ben Simmons. And in that, because they're in the same draft, obviously, but in that, and also because he's a fucking Celtics dick rider. And in that, where he also apparently in that podcast says we're running the same offense, which is crack. Are you high? Are you high? We're running the same offense? Why? Because we do a couple dribble handoffs, because once in a blue, they do the Ben and Joe screen thing in the post. You think it's the same offense? There's no world where this is the same offense. This is a tenet of a bunch of different offenses right now. Are you insane? Anyway. And in that, one of the scouts, he's reading what one of the scouts says to him, and one of the scouts says that Ben, that fuck what you see on social media, Ben doesn't work on his three-point shot at all. You see the social media stuff? Listen, and this goes to guys who are, to the uninitiated. The uninitiated, okay? This is like those younger fans who understand basketball through social media only. Ben making three-pointers in practice is nothing special. Dwight making three-pointers in practice, nothing special. Every NBA, I've been talking about this for years. You can find Dwight hitting full court trick shots, underhanded, from the tunnel, underhanded, full court trick shots, swishing them. Basketball players in practice do crazy shit all the time. Doesn't mean that they're going to show up in a game and do it. I don't care about the practice three-pointers. That's a social media thing. That's a young person social media thing. If you've played basketball enough, you see that there are practice legends, and then there are guys who in practice can't make a shot, but when the game starts, they're on fire. There are guys that in practice make every shot. When the game starts, they can't hit a lick. That's like a social media young person or just social media inexperienced basketball person thing. Just because Dwight hits three-pointers in practice don't mean he's going to hit three-pointers in the game. Shaq, and this is why I say that, because Shaq in his prime, when he was on the Lakers, they used to talk about Shaq makes every free throw in practice. He doesn't miss free throws in practice. Then in the game, he's 50% from the line. In practice, in game is two completely separate things. So it's not surprising that Ben is switching three-pointers. Now, he definitely did alter his shot. His shot is not the same, so he has to be practicing somewhat because his shot is not the same. So regardless of what that scout says, you got to understand, when you hear scouts talking about someone, there's gamesmanship in there, because these scouts are not fired, unemployed scouts. Russillo talked to team scouts who are trying to either lower value or heighten value, or trying to take stuff away so that if we trade Ben, we're getting less than we deserve, shit like that. So you gotta take that with a grain of salt. He obviously reworked his shot because his left arm is now tucked in, where last year and the years before his left arm was tucked out. Looked like he was a right-handed shooter shooting with his left hand. Now his left hand is tucked in. It's definitely a better looking shot. But the point being is, don't buy the hype of social media. If a team can game plan you out of a game that simply, anytime you go against any okay, solid coach, they can just get you out of the fucking game by saying, hey, just stay here. And he's locked up now. He's completely reliant on other guys making shots. And now this is the NBA, so of course you're relying on other guys making shots. But what's scary is that how far can you actually go? Now, one of those scouts said if you want like a mediocre team, definitely you can use Ben Simmons. I think what he meant by that was saying that if you have Ben, three good shooters, and a center, maybe 4 good shooters. Maybe you have like a Miles Turner on the team, right? If you have Ben, Miles Turner, and 3 good shooters, you're going to have a solid team. Yeah, of course, no question about it. You're going to have a solid team. 45 to 50 wins a game, but that's it. There is nothing Ben can offer offensively. That is scary. We already know Ben's ceiling. 4 years in, Ben has added nothing to his offensive game. No post moves, other than that ugly flip shot, which he's been doing for years now. He doesn't have a fadeaway. He doesn't have no mid-range talent. He's just still shooting the same rate of three-pointers. Him shooting that 1 3-pointer last week or whatever it was not a sign of things to come. He did that last year too, remember? He did that the year before that too. It's not a sign of things to come. No surprise. He shot a 3. Big deal. Big whoop. You know what I mean? Doesn't mean anything. And he bricked one too. He bricked another one. It doesn't mean anything. We know Ben's ceiling. Unfortunately, we see it. Ben's ceiling was last January. That was his ceiling. Last January, last February. That was his ceiling. And what's scary about yesterday's game is not just the lack of offense. It's that defensively, he was nothing. He wasn't anything on defense. He didn't stop. Who was he guarding? Their 3 perimeter players were lighting us ablaze, right? Let's look at this real quick. What do the third? Duncan Robinson finishes with 26 points. Tyler finishes with 34 points, and Gabe Vincent, a person who I've never heard of until yesterday's game, finished with 24 points. Kelly Olynyk finished with 15 points, and Precious finished with 17 points. Who did he stop here? Who did he defend here well? Who was the guy he locked up before he fouled out? He didn't lock anyone up. So, and here's part of the issue. Ben got stronger, right? We saw it before the bubble. He looked like Blake Griffin. You know what I mean? Just got stronger. So he added muscle. And the thought process was, okay, he's gotten stronger. That means he's going to be finishing better. He's going to be finishing through contact better, right? But he's not doing that. And because he got stronger and his shoulders got wider, he now doesn't get through screens at all. So when he's playing against a guy like when he's trying to defend a guy like Tyler Hero, he actually can't defend him because as soon as he gets run off a screen, it's over. He's out of the play. You have to switch everything when Ben is the primary defender because he can't get through the screen. Why? Because he got bigger for who knows what reason. He hasn't used any of the muscle that he added for anything. 5, 6, 12, and 6 turnovers, you're telling me that's a good game. And he fouled out? You're telling me that Ben played well? Listen, you can only live so much. I understand because this is my main argument sometimes with people. It's, did you watch the game? Is the first question I ask. Did you watch the game? Because I need to know exactly what you're talking about when you say something. If you're looking at box scores and arguing, then there's no conversation to be had. You need to have watched the game to understand the game. And perfect example, let's talk about Danny Green here. Danny is the only player in the history of the NBA to make 9 3-pointers and have a bad game at the same time. The only player. Go back and watch it. Tell me Danny Green had a good game. I'm not even going to point out the 6 turnovers yet, even though I just did, but I'm not even going to point those out yet. Danny had 9 3-pointers. He was 6 for 11 at one point, and then finished 3 for 10 down the stretch. Maybe it's Zumaw's fault because Mark kept saying, and for the record, every time Danny shot a 3 after that, when he hit 9. I mean, I think he went, essentially he was at 9, and then I think he missed 6 straight or something like that, is what it felt like. What Danny is the king of good play, bad play, good play. He's the king of that. He had some big rebounds. I will give him that for sure. Big rebounds down the stretch. Thank God. If it's not for the big rebounds down the stretch, right? Because it's the rebound and assist to Dakota Mathias that give us that it's the game winner essentially, right? It's that before Dakota that misses 2 free throws. Big rebounds, Danny down the stretch. Not really good defense at all. Big rebound down the stretch though, for sure. 2 steals and 2 blocks. That looks good. It sounds good. But he makes so many terrible plays. I mean, the 6 turnovers, and it's not completely Danny's fault. Again, this is what I've been talking about since day one. Danny, stop dribbling the motherfucking ball. But we need some guard to dribble the ball at some point, because especially once Maxey gets injured, once Maxey fouls out, Ben fouls out, Maxey fouls out, well, you need someone to handle the ball. Joe can't do every single thing on every single play, as much as we would love it. And even though he kind of does last night, as Danny is just turning the ball over and making boneheaded mistakes. He makes one pass. It's one of the most illogical, ridiculous passes I've ever seen. And it's not like it's not crazy and obvious, but as a basketball fan, as someone who watches a lot, it just doesn't make sense. Screen and roll. The screen doesn't work, and he rolls. This is like a 2K thing, right? Where a person who doesn't know how to play basketball calls for a screen, the screen doesn't work, and but he makes the pass anyway because he thinks that's what's supposed to happen next, and then it's a turnover. Well, that's what happens. It happens in the first half. He screens, the screen doesn't work. The guy is draped over Joe. Joe comes, instead of screening and rolling, Joe then decides to screen and pop out. And it's just the most illogical angle. Danny launches this pass at Joe. Joe has no hope of getting this pass. It's a terrible pass. It doesn't even make any sense. Danny just sometimes, man, just don't let him dribble the ball. That's all it is. Danny has a great game once you remove the dribbling, right? Yesterday's game, Danny, great game once you remove dribbling out of take dribbling out, and then it's boom, Hall of Fame game. Put the dribbling back in, boom, trash. I've never seen a person hit 9 3-pointers and it be a bad game still. That's Danny for you. But the point being is, you could look at the box score and think, man, it's Danny, 29 points, 10 rebounds, 6 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks. Man, Danny had a monster, 6 turnovers, but monster game. But when you watch the game and you're watching time and time again, Danny almost throwing the game away with the turnovers being so miserable in the fucking crooks of the game. These were turnovers in the crooks of the game, with the game in the balance. This isn't just turnovers in the first, second quarter, in the third quarter. This is turnovers when we're trying to make comebacks, we're trying to establish a lead, we're trying to hold them back. It's turnovers in the crux of the fucking game. Bad decisions. So when you look at the box score and think, man, he had a good game, but then when you watch the game, you're like, whoa, shit. Yeah, he shot pretty well, even though down the stretch he made no points. He had that one putback, which was a good play. But when you start really picking through, you start realizing, damn, man, Danny was fucking rough at certain points yesterday. I mean, he looked like, what are you doing? When you look at Ben's box score, you can say he had a bad game. Now, Ben did have a bad game. But there are games where someone has like this, and you can't account for all the plays that person might have made on the court. The point is, you got to watch the game. You got to watch the game. And what happens is Mark and Al are relying on that when they're saying, I mean, it's like propaganda. They're relying on that when they're saying Ben had a good game. They're hoping that guys didn't watch the game with an objective eye. Like, I'm watching the game as only a fan, as if I'm not watching the game and I'm like, Ben, what the fuck are you doing right now? Ben, what the fuck, Ben? Listen, the last foul was ticky-tack. I'll give him that. That was a ticky-tack foul. When they fouled him out on Gabe Vincent, I didn't see the contact. All I said, he saw contact. Now, the replays that we saw doesn't show contact. The replay is not a good replay because the angle is terrible. And in it had to have been a ticky-tack foul that we missed something, because when I watch it, I don't see contact. Whereas on the one play where Isaiah fouls Duncan at the 3-point line, I see contact on Duncan's left arm. I don't see contact on this play. The foul before it, again on Kelly Olynyk, yeah, it's a foul. It's a rip through. You know what I mean? Sure, Ben has his own hand on the ball, but he's impeding his arm. It's a stupid play. It's just a dumb play. It doesn't have to happen. You have 4 fouls. That is not the 5th foul you need to waste. That's a bad foul. Ben was not effective on defense at all. So if you're going to come out and not do a whole lot on offense, and then have a bad defensive game, what exactly are you now offering then? What are you offering here? I mean, it's scary. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. And the reason why I bring up these numbers is not, again, I don't mean to disparage Ben. I don't. You know, and I appreciate Ben and I appreciate what he has to offer. But it's just, we are not anything if Joe isn't playing. And that's scary. I'm not saying that the right trade is James. James yesterday in that powder blue suit, that powder blue suit did not do you any favors, brother. They didn't do any favors. I don't know if it was the powder blue or if it was just your body. I don't know if it's the powder blue or the powdered donuts. You know what I mean? But boy, you know, you're not going to go into that press conference and say you did everything. Listen, I get it. He's talking about over the scope of the last, 10 years or whatever it is that he's been on the Rockets now. I guess not 10 years. I think it's eight years that he's been on the Rockets now. 8 years? Yeah, probably. He's been on the Rockets. He's done everything he could, and I agree with that. MVPs, crazy numbers, with some rough teams. You know what I mean? They've had some rough teams. Their teams haven't been particularly good. Look at Clinton's trash. Did you watch the Hawks Sixers game? Clinton is nothing. Okay, he is nothing. Russ is Russ, and then the CP3, that was a chance, and the CP3 hurts his hamstring, and that's unfortunate. It's bad luck. But you're not going to come in 30 pounds overweight and tell me that you did everything you could. You know what I mean? Not this year. This is not the time to say that. And you're quitting on your teammates, and I get it. You don't want to play there. I get it. At a certain level, I do understand, man. Listen, there's been jobs where I've been like, I don't want to fucking work here anymore, and I nailed that bitch in. You know what I mean? And for the people who are like, well, but he makes millions. I get it. I get it. But here's the thing: you're saying he makes millions from the standpoint of you make $32 a year. Okay, so in your $32 a year salary, you're thinking, well, he makes millions. Yeah, of course. Well, because you're making $32 a year, and your hands have grease on it that will never come off. You're thinking if you gave me $15 million a year, I'd play my ass off. Of course, because you're coming from this position. But we're talking about guys who were making millions already year after year after year after year after year, doing everything they can. Meanwhile, are getting torn down by the national press constantly. It's a little bit different, is my point. So I get it. But point being, I'm not saying that trading for James is the right move. I'm not saying that at all. I don't know what you would trade Ben for. You know what I mean? Could you trade Ben for Pascal Siakam? Maybe. Would the Rockets consider that? Since, it just doesn't seem like Pascal's working for them. I think Ben would probably work really well there. You know what I mean? With Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet are great spot-up shooters, surrounded by those guys. And then, I don't know, whatever the fuck else they have on that goddamn team. OG Anunoby and he'd probably work great on that team. Could you trade Ben for Pascal? Let's switch it up, and then Pascal can come here and be a small forward and keep Toby at the forward because that's the only place he's good at. And then you even spread the floor out even a little bit more. Take pressure off of Pascal to allow him to be the third guy because that's really his best. Maybe that makes sense. I don't know if they would make that trade. I don't know if we would make that trade. But the point is, as much as I think Ben and Joe could work, I am also thinking that Ben and Joe can't work. You know what I mean? We see the ceiling. And I know, listen, I'm guilty. I was relying on Ben and Joe were a bounce away from going into overtime with the eventual champs in Game 7. For sure. That's true. That is a true statement. But that was in the second round of the playoffs. That wasn't the Eastern Conference Finals. Right? That was the second round of the playoffs. And we lost. That's the furthest we're going to get, and that might be our ceiling. That, I think, is our ceiling with Ben and Joe. I'm kind of starting to feel that way now, watching them together. And you're allowed to change your mind, regardless of what people may think. People get doxxed because they had an opinion one way 3 years ago, and then 3 years later they change their opinion, but then they run that opinion from 3 years ago back, and they try to cancel you for it. That's really what cancel culture is, even though cancel culture isn't a thing. It's not actually real. No one actually gets canceled, regardless of what people may say. No one gets canceled. Torrey is out here getting 1 million streams. He shot a woman in the foot. You can do whatever the fuck you want. I promise you. Cancel culture isn't real. But the point being, you're allowed to change your opinion. And I'm starting to really waver on Ben. And listen, Ben's going to have good games later, but it doesn't matter because I know the ceiling and I know the basement of Ben. You know what I mean? And the ceiling is never going to be someone who allows us to spread the floor. I just pointed these numbers out because in the middle of a game, Ben sits, Joe is just Joe and a bunch of guys. It's Joe and a bunch of guys out there. You know what I mean? It's Joe and just some guys. And on 15 possessions, he scores 20. We scored 27 points. That's crazy. That's incredible. We sit here and assume that it's Ben who is an offense onto himself, right? The passing and all of that, the drive and the kick, it's Ben who's an offense onto himself. Well, just Joe shows and stretches that he is an offense onto himself. that he can do what Joker does if given the ball more. He'll never have 10 assists in a game, probably. I think he's had close, but that's just not going to be his thing. The point being is that when you play the game through Joe, good things are happening. When Joe is on the court, we are at our best. And the reason why I mentioned Pascal is because when Joe comes off the court, Pascal is a player who can get his own bucket. He can get a basket himself. He can post up. He can shoot. He can do a lot of things offensively where he can score when we need it. You know what I mean? Especially against the second unit. So that means Joe sits, Pascal can take over some of the offense with Toby, right? Stuff like that. I'm not saying that trade's going to happen. You know, I'm just thinking the reason why I'm thinking about it is because the Raptors are struggling, right? And they might be on the precipice of wanting to blow it up, right? Well, here's Ben in the draft pick. Give us Pascal. They flip Kyle Lowry to somebody else and get some more draft picks maybe, and they kind of start from scratch there. But the point being, it just, you know, we've seen the ceiling. I don't know that, again, I don't think Ben for James Harden is the right move. As much as I respect James Harden's game, it's just James is also older. You know what I mean? And if you're trading Ben for James Harden this year, you're kind of blowing up this season because James is mad out of shape. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, he's wild out of shape. Do you want to bring that in here right now? I don't personally. You know, James isn't doing himself any favors, so I don't know. Ben, yesterday was a rough game for Ben. I'm sorry, broadcast team, you're not going to tell me he had a good offensive game. You know what I mean? You're just not going to tell me. I just gave you the numbers. I told you why. Maxey played well. He played well yesterday. 16 points, 8 assists, only one turnover. That's really the huge thing. Only one turnover while getting us into an offense and essentially getting the fuck out of Joe's way. Maxey, all of the rookies, and this is a rookie thing. Maxey, Isaiah played well too. Isaiah shooting pretty well, I think. I'm really happy with what I'm seeing from Isaiah over the last few games. That's been the biggest thing about this time, right, is that all these guys are getting more minutes. They're able to get more comfortable, and Isaiah's shot right now is looking good. You know, it's looking good. 4 for 10. It's not great, but that's 40%. You know, if he's 40% every game, well, motherfucker, that's awesome. You know what I mean? That's all you can ask. But these guys both, they need to get stronger. You know what I mean? They just need to get stronger. Maxey is a good defender in terms of effort. He's in the right spot, but he's just getting bowled over because he's just not strong enough. And Hero having this, he being Hero's second year, working with a guy like Jimmy, you know, as we all know, Jimmy loves the culture there and all this bullshit. But Hero is strong. You know what I mean? Hero works his ass off. Hero spends practices defending Jimmy Butler and getting defended by Jimmy Butler. So, yeah, when a guy like Maxey is playing good defense, it's really not going to affect him much. You know what I mean? Because he's just gotten stronger. Unfortunately, Tyrese can't do anything about that. Isaiah can't do anything about that. Dakota is just not a good defender necessarily. He had a rough game. If it's not for that one three-pointer, and it's the biggest three-pointer, it's arguably the biggest or second biggest three-pointer of the game, other than the Isaiah Joe clutch three-pointer at the end of the fourth quarter. I mean, listen, we don't go into overtime without that three. Then Dakota essentially hits the game-winning three. But without that three-pointer, Dakota gets cut yesterday. You know what I mean? He has a rough fucking game. Gives up the 4-point play. I think he gives up 2 4-point plays. Misses the 2 free throws to ice the game. It's not great for him, but he did hit that 3-pointer. Dwight, good numbers, 10 and 8, but he's just in there to foul people, honestly. That's all he's in there to do is just foul the shit out of people, have stupid fouls, and argue. You know what I mean? It just whatever. He had a couple good offensive rebounds, I thought, that were really, really big. The offensive rebounds, at the time he grabbed them, they were offensive rebounds and putbacks, were really big plays. You know, I'll say that. They were really big plays. He didn't necessarily have a bad game, but in the first half, it was like, what the fuck are you doing out here? And Mike Scott, I thought played well, shot well, you know, 4 for 12. That's not necessarily well, but I thought his shot looked good. You know, down the stretch of the game, everyone was missing shots. You know what I mean? Like, as the game was getting tight, that's what happens in these games. The offense is not going to be the thing that's flowing, especially when everyone's playing elevated minutes, and we're on a back-to-back. You're not expecting people to make shots late in the game. But I thought in the beginning he shot really well, played pretty good defense. This is the pocket we need the Mike Scott to be in. If Mike Scott could go 2 for 5 every game, that's exactly what we need him to be. 2 for 5 or 1 for 2, something like that. You know, just come in, make a couple shots, and that's it. Play good defense. How many minutes did Joel play yesterday? Joel only played 40 minutes, which is crazy. It felt like he played fucking all of the minutes. Danny played a ton of minutes. It makes sense that Danny was missing a lot of those shots. Let me be clear. 50 minutes into the game on a back-to-back, and he's older. That's a lot to ask. But it's because our guards, are getting fouled out and struggling. Dakota was almost unplayable at certain points yesterday. But so it is what it is. I mean, that's pretty much all I got to say. Ben, man, I don't know what to say about Ben. Ben played 31 minutes yesterday. That's crazy. That's a shame because he fouled out. But it's just like, bro, we need more than that, Ben. We're gonna need more from you. You know what I mean? We need more from you. That just ain't enough. And unfortunately, I think that's all you have. That's all you have to offer right now. See the only argument that existed prior to, I know there were people who said you should trade Joe and give this team to Ben, and I never, ever, ever believed that. But out of anger, I've said that before for sure, and last year especially, because last year was frustrating. But really, the argument for me was Ben plays more games than Joe. Ben is more reliable than Joe. Well, now Joe's playing back-to-backs. Joe was dominating games. There is no argument here. There's no argument. There's not anything close to it. If you still believe that we should be trading Joe to give the team over to Ben, I don't know what to tell you. You're gonna trade Joe to a team who's gonna win a championship with him. You know what I mean? There is nothing. There is no trade for Joe, unless the trade for Joe is for. I don't even know what I would trade Joe for, honestly. Because remember, if you did trade Joe to keep Ben, that means you have to get someone here that can play next to Ben, right? So you're not going to trade Joe for CJ McCollum. That's not enough. And they would have to be like CJ McCollum, Nurkic, and Cov or something. That's not enough. That's not good. That's not winning anything. That's not winning us anything. Nurkic is not a good trade there. Would you trade Joe for Kristaps and Josh Richardson? That's not enough. Kristaps is injured all the time, and that's a championship for them. Luka and Joe is a championship. Would you trade Joe for Devin Booker? They're not going to trade Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton for Joe, and I wouldn't do that again. DeAndre Ayton and Ben presents more issues. There is no trade. There's no trade for Joe. I'm sorry. There's nothing. There's nothing that doesn't demand a king's ransom. You know what I mean? That doesn't demand everyone. Somebody, a team's everything. Their franchise for Joe. I don't know what we're going to do with Ben. I don't know what we're going to do with Ben. I'm sorry. I'm doing 1,000-yard stare here. I just don't know what we're going to do with Ben. That's it, everyone. Everyone wash your hands. I'm going to do a podcast at some point on what happened in the Capitol last week. I'm just doing some information gathering. And I might even wait until the Civil War that happens on Inauguration Day to put out my podcast. But, we'll talk about it. Racism is just wild. And it has a lot to do with that. And I'll just tease it with that because I'm sure there are people who may hear this and not see the racism that's involved in something like that. And I'm not just talking about the basics of if black people had gone up there, they would have been. I'm not even talking about the basics of that. There's other stuff, way deeper stuff. I'm going to put out a NBA podcast at some point this week or at the beginning of next week where we take a spin through the NBA. There's a ton of shit to talk about. You know what I mean? A ton of things to talk about aside from Steph being back and pissed off at people for counting him out. I'm not going to judge Kyrie. I promise you that. I won't be judging Kyrie on this podcast. You shouldn't either. And that's it. Oh, and, Boston just gets mad games postponed because whatever, it's Boston. We don't get anything postponed, but, go figure, no problem. Adam Silver, you should just – I get it. They don't want to postpone the NBA because they're afraid that if they postpone the NBA, that by sending guys to their own homes and shit like that, when they come back, there's going to be more positive tests anyway and all this. I get it. This is not working, though, right now. I'm going to be honest with you. This is not working. This is completely flawed. What can any NBA team take from the last – if you're the Sixers, what can you take from the last week of basketball? We get crushed by the Nuggets because we don't have enough players. We get crushed by the Hawks for the same reason, and then we crush the Heat who don't have enough players. Well, we don't crush the Heat. We blow for blow against the Heat who don't have enough players. What can you take away from any of the events that have happened? What is a team supposed to take away from this? You're saying that this play is good here? Is it? I don't know. A piece of me, as much as I don't want the NBA to go away, I mean, listen, the NBA is my heart. I love it. But, bro, until people get vaccinated, is this even – or vaccinated. Until people get vaccinated, is this even – you know what I mean? Is this even worth it? I don't know. Everybody, wash your hands, wear a mask. Yo, COVID sucks, man. I feel better for one day, get sick for 3 days. I don't know what's going on, so it's terrible. And I don't even know if it's COVID. I could be getting sick because I have like a mold allergy and other shit. I could be getting sick because of other things, but I don't know. That's what's confusing. Wash your hands, stay safe, everyone. Black Lives Matter. Arrest the cops who killed Breonna Taylor. You already know the drill. Fuck Donald Trump and anyone who stands with him. We're just gonna keep it real. And I'll see you on the flip.
Yo. Yo. Justice for the blind. Just something that'll find in the rhyme that are coming from my mind. Used to come